Okay, also we are going to get into some more complicated Revit modeling tasks here over the next couple of weeks. And a lot of them are just going to come in sort of on demand. I am trying to model this and how. And what I'm going to be doing is just, doing my best to find an efficient and accurate way to model those details that you're sending me in Revit and posting those to the YouTube channel for the class. So, in particular, this question was how to model this portion of the chair back, and really, for that matter, the chair in its entirety. Now, Revit isn't the best tool to model something like that in. There are other, like Rhino is amazing for this. Fusion 360 is another more production design modeling tool that's absolutely awesome to work with. In particular, if you look closely at a chair, especially in the photograph, you see these nice little specular highlights on the edge. That's because all of these edges are rounded. This edge is rounded. Revit isn't really built to do that as quickly and accurately, but that doesn't mean that we can't use it as a tool to really quickly block some of these things in and make reasonable facsimiles of what they are. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and build something really quickly in terms of a version of that chair in Revit. So I've already got it started, and I'm going to break down a couple of the pieces here just by going to Edit in Place. Well, let's go ahead and erase some of these elements, and we'll start with the easy part right here. I won't recreate this, but this is essentially a simple extrusion. I'll just go to Edit Extrusion, and you can see it's a baseline shape that is roughly the dimensions of the chair, so it's about 2 feet wide. It's about 2 feet deep once you look at this overall arc. Just add a little line in right here. So from the back of the arc to the front, it's about 2 feet. I don't know that that's the exact size of the chair, but we're reasonably close. And then the chair, it's stopping at a height of 2 feet and starting at 111, which means when I green checkbox this, that chair is going to sit, if we look at it in elevation, 2 feet above the ground plane that it's associated with. Cool. So let's add that chair back in, which is really one of the more complicated pieces. So to do that, the best tool is going to be the sweep tool. So I'm just going to activate sweep. And since there's already a nice edge for the sweep to follow, I'm going to use, rather than sketch path, which is what I would often use, I'm going to do pick path. And what pick path allows me to do is select the edge that I want the sweep to follow. Now, again, what you're going to see is this reference plane that is created on the first edge of that sweep. So it's really important. If you need that reference plane in a certain location, make sure that you select a convenient first line to work with. In this case, since I have that chair set up like this, I can set that up in an elevation view, which is really handy. So with that done, that's my path that's going to sweep around the back of the chair. So I'm going to green checkbox that. And now I'm going to go to Edit Profile. So when I'm editing the profile, that is essentially drawing on that reference plane what I want to sweep across. So I'm going to start by setting up about an 18-inch tall guideline for myself. Again, just looking at the photograph, I'm totally guessing, but hoping that that's reasonably accurate. And if you look at the chair and slide that image back in again, there's kind of a scoop up at the top and a curve on the top edge. And I think we can get reasonably close with both of those. So using that guide, I'm going to draw a spline that starts by coming up, angled out just a little bit, one more click a little bit closer to the top, and then as it gets closer to that top edge, I'm going to angle that line out just a little bit more. So again, total guesswork, right? I'm going to delete both of those guides. Total guesswork, but I'm feeling pretty good about that. That seems about right. Okay, so next I'm going to offset this by 1 inch. So that's those two pieces are working together. Next, I'm going to fill this end. So I'm doing an endpoint snap and an endpoint snap. And then rather than just leaving that as a square edge, that would be kind of harsh. If you were bumped against that, it would cut your leg open. So that's no fun. Let's go ahead and chamfer off or make that a round end. I'm going to delete that. And so I want to check this. I'm going to click thin lines just to make sure all of that stuff is matched together. Working off of splines can be a little bit tricky sometimes, simply because it's a little more difficult sometimes for the software to find their endpoints. And now I'm just going to go ahead and finish off this line, sort of overdrawing these two edges. So those are two straight lines right there. If you notice, I can't trim a spline because Revit doesn't know how to extend that line. So I'm using just two straight lines at the end here, and I'm trimming them together to complete that overall loop, right? So that should be one nice closed loop now. So let's orbit around that in 3D and kind of see what I've created there. So if I green checkbox this once, that says, okay, I'm fine with my profile path. I'll green checkbox again, and that gives me that shape for the chair back. Now, if you notice, these also have a little bit of a scoop right here. So that would be done with a void form. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with this in terms of building a spline to create that sort of cutout of the front. But this time I need to use an edge. I can use this edge right here of the chair seat as a reference plane to make that void form. So I'm going to go create, void form, void extrusion. I'm going to set my reference plane by picking a plane, and I'm going to use the tab key to hopefully find that edge right there. Okay, I'm going to turn on show, and you can see I've got that as a reference plane to draw on now. So I'm going to go to this elevation view, and I'm going to use a spline, and again I'm going to start right there at that edge. I'm going to start by coming back at a slight angle, and as this gets closer to the top, I'm going to make that angle a little bit more severe. Something about like that. Okay, so that's the beginning point of that void. And now what I want to do is block the rest of that out like this to subtract out that front edge of the chair. So I'm going to draw this as a line up and across and down. That wasn't a very good angle at the downs. Just to be anal retentive about it. There we go. That coming down, and then I'm going to use the endpoint of this spline right here to trim those two together. And now you can see this is going to subtract out that chair back. So green checkbox, I'm going to use my grip to extend that void across the chair. Now, Revit does this from time to time. It's actually not cutting anything yet, right? On occasion, if things are not made in the right location, which is totally my fault because I did not set my start and end point correctly at the beginning, on that void, it's not going to cut things. So there's a tool in there for that. If it's not cutting through the geometry, even if I know the geometry pieces are intersecting, that is simply cut. So I'm going to select the cut tour and then the cut to E, right? So this does a pretty good job of estimating that form. And again, I'm not getting these sort of nice round edges like what's in the actual chair, but I'm getting something that's very similar to the shape. And the last thing to add in are going to be the legs for the chair. There's sort of these pieces that are crisscrossing underneath, and those are off axis. So we'll need to do something slightly different with the reference plane for those. So let me switch this back to hidden line, and let's go to the top view. Actually, I'm going to set this all the way to wireframe so I can see through everything. So for this, again, this is going to be a simple extrusion, but I need to set up a custom reference plane that comes across at an angle to give me a piece of paper in three-dimensional space to draw on. So to do that, I am going to go to a floor plan view, and I'm going to use the reference plane tool. So I'm going to go to reference plane, and I'm going to draw this at hopefully a precise angle, 135. Come on, Revit, work with me. 135, right through here. Okay, then I'm going to select that reference plane, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this legs 1. Okay, so naming it is super important so that I can select it later. If I look at that in 3D, what I can do now is I can go to Create, Extrusion. I'm going to set my reference plane to legs 1. So this, when you draw a reference plane, it will not show up in that list if I do not give it a name. Okay, so super important to make sure you give it a name. So that is set to legs 1. From here, what I'm going to do is I am simply going to go to a view that's approximate from that reference plane. Just use this one right here. And I know that my line is going to come down. Quick look back at what that chair is doing. Someplace just to the inside, I know it's going to come down 1 foot 11 inches. I know that because the top of the chair is 2 feet, and that is 1 foot thick, right? So again, just doing this to create some geometry to act as a guide. From here, I'm going to select the starting point. Those legs are angled out slightly, probably not much past this outside edge of the chair. So I might want to actually use that as a little bit of a guide right there. I know in terms of their thickness, those are also probably about 1.5 inches. Again, just guessing really, but using reference, guessing, making an educated guess by using the reference images provided from Kasha, the photograph of the chairs. So 1.5 inches that direction. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing here on the back of the chair. To actually do this using the mirror command, so I make sure I get the angle correct. So I'm going to select both of these by using the left lasso. I'm going to use my mirror function to establish those on the back edge of the chair. And then let's draw another guideline. That's approximately that back edge of the chair. And I'll move those 2 lines to that. So the next thing that I need to do is go ahead and delete the majority of these guides, except for this guy right here. I'm going to use it. Along with a copy of it to be the base of the chairs. Or I should say the bottom of those chair legs. And then it looks like I need to trim the top just a little bit as well. All right, so let's see what's happening here in 3D. Oh, and that's terrible, right? Oh my gosh, that's awful. Okay, that's happened because, again, I'm kind of drawing off axis, right? So if I look at this, let's go to my viewer. And so this is actually creating, well, it's supposed to be creating a work plane viewer. And it failed miserably. Let's forget that I even tried to do that. Let's just sort of angle this so I can see that chair, hopefully a little bit more square on. Okay, and I'm just tabbing that in. And then I am going to move this over, right? So essentially all that I'm doing is just trying to get that arranged correctly. So again, my offsets for this, I want to be about 1/2 inch in each direction from that reference plane. So I'm going to do 1 as a negative ½ inch and one is a positive ½ inch extrusion. What that means is it's going to go a ½ inch this way, ½ inch this way to give me a 1 inch thick piece. Blammo. So let's take that and look at it as a shaded view. You can start to see how that's coming together. The next step for something like this would then be to come in, and I'm going to copy this piece. I'm going to turn off the constraint. That means that it's no longer attached to the reference plane. And I'm going to move it up just so I can see it. Next, I'm going to activate rotate, and I'm going to disjoin it from the reference plane so that I can rotate it 90 degrees. Let's turn on hidden line, or wireframe again rather. And I'm going to move this about the center point right back underneath. And it looks like it needs to nudge down a little bit. Just to build some consistency between where those two pieces are. If I look at that back in 3D, I have a reasonably good estimation of what that chair is doing.